Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And today's guest is really right on the leading edge of impact investing, doing some exciting new things. And I'm so excited to talk with her. Our guest is Phyllis Costanza, CEO of UBS Optimus Foundation. Phyllis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, the pleasure is all ours. Now, Phyllis, you are doing the first ever development impact bond. This is sort of a pay for success, social impact bond kind of thing, but applied in a new platform. In this case, a girls' education in India. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Sure. Well, as you said, it's a very new model. The development impact bond is based on a social impact bond, and I know you've done some sessions on that as well. And it's a bit different than a pay for success model because we actually look at outcomes as opposed to outputs. So what we're doing is funding a program in Rajasthan where more than 50% of girls are illiterate to try to get more girls into school. We're paying for two things really. We're paying, number one, to get girls who are out of school into school. And the second thing we're paying for is to improve literacy and numeracy of these schools. And that's the outcome that I mentioned.
So let's talk about this. Typically, there are at least three players in a social impact bond scenario. So you have someone who pays if outcomes are achieved. You have someone who puts money up front with the potential of a return. And then there are providers who are yet a third group. Walk us through who are the players in this transaction.
Okay, well, this is where it gets a bit complicated because there's a lot of players in
That's why we're having you on the show, so you can explain it.
Okay, great. I will explain it in a very simple way. I'm sure your viewers will easily understand it. So first of all, let me just explain who we are, UBS Optimus Foundation. We are actually a service for our clients to help them do smart philanthropy. And it's important to understand in the context of our role with the Development Impact Bond. So we are looking for really smart investments that have an outcome. So in education, for instance, we want to make sure that not only children are going to school, but that their learning outcomes improve, particularly literacy and numeracy. That's what's important to us. So in this Development Impact Bond, we're working with an award-winning organization in Rajasthan called Educate Girls. Educate Girls is trying to get some of the most marginalized girls in Rajasthan to school, and their program also helps to improve learning outcomes for all of the children in the school, and it's a government school. So they are the implementer in this. We are the investor, and we're the investor because we believe we can bring more client money to a program like this to invest in things that improve the lives of people at the bottom of the pyramid. So as the investor, what we do is we give an initial, I'll just call it a grant, we give the initial funds, all of the funds up front to Educate Girls in order to achieve the goals. Now that's also a big difference in the pay for performance. Pay for performance pays only after the outputs are achieved. So we give that money up front. Then if we achieve outcomes, which as I explained before, getting girls into school and improving learning, then the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, who is the outcome payer, will pay us the money that we gave Educate Girls plus a return. We also have an intermediary named Instiglio, and they help to coordinate the entire transaction. And for this, because this is the first development impact bond, we've also included somebody who's going to help us share the lessons learned. They're going to write up all of the lessons learned from this so that we can share it with everybody out there who's interested, and also offer some advice on how we can simplify this.
Fantastic. Well, this is a very interesting model. So you're the investor. Educate Girls is the program provider, if you will. And then remind me who you said the success payer is.
The success payer or outcome payer is Children's Investment Fund Foundation. And I used to work for them. And so when we decided to do this bond, I went to an organization that I trusted, who is deeply committed to outcomes. And I thought that if we could offer them an opportunity whereby we're taking on all the risk and they're simply paying only if certain outcomes that they would want to achieve anyway are achieved, that this would be a win-win, that they would really like this, because they wouldn't have to spend all that time doing the due diligence up front.
Yeah, this really works well for people who would pay anyway. If you would make a donation to educate girls anyway, this is a no-brainer, because now you only have to make that donation if the program works to achieve your target outcomes. It's a brilliant strategy, and it really does portend great potential for increasing funding for development activities. And I'm sure that's why you're doing this. Can you give us just a sense of the scale of this prototype launch? I expect it's small, but it's a proof of concept nonetheless.
Yes. So financially, it is small. It's probably one of the smallest of the social impact bonds financially. It's roughly $300,000. However, it's the largest in terms of beneficiaries. We're targeting to improve the lives and learning outcomes of almost 20,000 children in Rajasthan, and that far exceeds any social impact bond.
Yeah, so you're talking about $15 per girl. I mean, that is just a tiny amount to have the kind of impact you're hoping to see. It's just huge. I suspect there are opportunities throughout the developing world for this kind of financing. Where else do you see it applying?
Well, also building off of the great model in your home state of Utah, we're looking now to develop a fund in South Africa for early childhood care and development with the government. Now that one would be a social impact bond because the government would be the outcome payer. So it's slightly different, but we're also starting to explore other ways to put together funds so that clients could ultimately invest in vehicles like this. And we think that we could bring a lot more and better money to the sector. Now, is this going to change the world? Will billions of dollars ultimately flow into this? I don't believe that's the case. I think we're naive to think that one tool is going to change a lot. But if you look at the scope of the problems in the world, it is tragic that even $1 is going to programs that don't work. And we know so many that aren't working, and people continue to fund them. We face that every single day. So if we can even make the point of how important outcomes are, and that people ought to be paying only for outcomes, not for activities.
Well, it is a radical departure in thinking that's developed over the last 5 years or so, it seems to me. This focus on impact, results, outcomes, whatever label you want to put on it, there's been a downstream outcomes-based philosophy shift that comes perhaps from the business community saying we shouldn't be funding programs that don't work when we could fund programs that work. And what you're doing ties perfectly into that movement. How did you personally get connected to this shift in thinking?
Well, personally, I was I think I was the first employee at Children's Investment Fund Foundation more than 10 years ago, probably longer than that. And I was also on the board there for 8 years. And they had a very, very strong mentality around outcomes, as did UBS Optimus Foundation, where I am now. And in my current job, what I saw, we work with clients every single day, and almost all of our clients who are extremely wealthy want to do something good for society. And while the intentions come from the best place, they're often very misguided. If I had a nickel for every client who came to me and said, I want to build an orphanage in Africa, we'd have lots of money to spend on outcomes, I can assure you. And so we're trying to work with our clients to say, look, whether it's an orphanage or whatever it is, we know there's so many things that are actually not only not good for children, but actually have negative impacts on children. And so people who want to do good, they want to put their money into something that's going to have a positive outcome. And we need to try to move money away from programs that don't work to things that do work, out of things like orphanages, out of things like building schools. I also talk to people all the time who want to build a school, and I have to explain to them that all 4 walls and a roof don't improve a child's life. What matters is what happens in the school. What matters is what happens in the home. And these are the things that are going to really dramatically change the potential of a child's life, not a building.
Yeah, very, very great insight. Thank you very much for sharing that. I want to continue this dialogue along your personal experience. You know, as the CEO of the UBS Optimus Foundation, you are a role model to a lot of people, some formally, some informally, but to many. Who do you look up to as a role model?
Well, thank you. And I meet a lot of extraordinary people in this line of work, and I meet them every day, people who are making tremendous sacrifices. And I would say somebody who really moved me deeply was a man I met 2 months ago. I met him in Chengdu, China, and his name was Hu Bin. And Hu Bin lives with his severely disabled son who has cerebral palsy. They were living on the 9th floor of a high-rise building when the earthquake hit in 2008. And the first thing that went through his mind when the earthquake stopped, all the electricity was off, he thought, how am I going to get my son down these flights of stairs? And what if something happened to me? Who would take care of my child? Who would love my child? He found somebody else in the building who helped him get his son down the 9 flights of stairs. And then after that, he did a lot of deep thinking about what happens to his son when he's gone, who will love him. So he and a co-founder started an organization called Benevolence Home. We're actually not supporting them. It's not one of our grantees, but he personally deeply moved me. He gave up his job. He made tremendous sacrifices to create, it's like a daycare center where children go during the day, and the caretakers there were amazing. They just took such great care of these children. You could tell they loved them. The children loved being there. And it just, he shattered all of my misconceptions about, first of all, children with disabilities. This child was also so impressive. You know, as I said, he was very severely disabled. He was in a wheelchair. He had very jarring, violent movements that he couldn't control. He couldn't sit up, he couldn't stand. And his father told me that he can play chess against 10 people at one time and beat them all. And it was, I can't even beat one person at chess. So, just really, I mean, the whole story moved me. And this man who could have done something to make sure that his child received care after he was gone, instead he made the sacrifice to make sure that hundreds, thousands of other children were able to benefit from this as well. And so he's somebody I would say that I really admire and look up to.
Oh, that's a great role model. What an inspiration. That's just tremendous. Now, coming back to you, I think you have demonstrated exceptional competence in order to be where you are. And yet I think your career path could have gone any number of directions. Why do you find yourself now living in Zurich and working in philanthropy of all things? Why that?
Well, first of all, have you ever been to Zurich, Devin?
Yes, and it's wonderful.
So I mean, that I don't have to answer the question why Zurich. It's a gorgeous place, a wonderful place to live, great place to raise children. So, but I found myself working in philanthropy. It happened serendipitously. I studied public policy. I worked in the public sector. I worked in the for-profit sector. And I worked as a management consultant. I ultimately moved into this area because friends of mine asked me to sit on their board of a foundation they were starting. And I found the issues so intellectually challenging, so inspirational. And I stayed in the sector and have never looked back. And I love it. I mean, I love waking up Monday morning and going to work. I feel incredibly fortunate. I've made no sacrifice. In fact, I feel like my life has been tremendously enriched by this.
Oh, that's great. Now, one last question for you before we go. If you would just share one thing you do every day to be more impactful. Everyone who's watching is coming from a variety of backgrounds. We'll have impact investors, social entrepreneurs, philanthropists, all kinds of folks watching the show, but they all want to have more impact. What do you do every day that we could emulate to have more impact?
Well, I think for us, the most important thing is choose your partners wisely. Look at their management structure, look at what they're implementing, look at their financials, and then get off their back. Do not micromanage them. If you trust that they have the right people, they have the right approach, they're working in the right place, then organizations, foundations, grant makers should not micromanage their every move. They should be focused on their outcomes and let them adapt their activities to whatever is most impactful. And I would say that is my biggest message. Do not micromanage. None of us like micromanagers.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. We sure appreciate your time today, Phyllis. Great insights, and so exciting to learn about the development impact bond concept and this particular program as a prototype. I hope it really scales quickly and successfully. But before you go, please tell us how people can learn more about this program, how they could connect with you or UBS. Don't leave people hanging.
Okay, sure. We'd love to hear from you. Our website is ubs.com/Optimus, OPTIMUS.
Fantastic. Well, Phyllis, thank you very much for being with us. We wish you every success in this development impact bond.
Thanks so much, Devin. It was a pleasure talking with you.
All righty. Let's do some good.